So, you moved from this personal sense of flow to starting to look at organizations to tackle this interruption and waste. Where did you when did you pick value streams as this is the thing that seems to check the boxes or seems to address what challenges and opportunities I'm seeing?
I specifically, and the words were slightly different, but I think it was 2006. So a while ago, because it was as soon as, and it's kind of back to your point on we need a way of reasoning about it, and we need a way of describing it and of modeling it and of testing it, right? And whatever that is. And what had happened a lot to date is we had really good ways of reasoning about the source code, right? And then DevOps was still, I mean, a lot of us were doing continuous integration at that time, right? 20 years ago. So we had our pipelines, we had all the build automation and so on. And the neat thing is that became a thing, right? When back then systems like Cruise and the stuff ThoughtWorks was doing all of that. Cruise control. But so the pipeline was a thing we started talking about as an industry, right? The delivery pipeline. And it was really helpful, right? Because it wasn't just all about the code. It was also started being about how the code is getting delivered. And of course, then the agile tools and boards with swim lanes came around. So people stopped. Initially, we literally were doing things on posted on or Outlook's tasks or SharePoint lists or whatever. So this really neat thing happened, which is that I realized, well, it's not just about the code. We now need to think about how the code flows into production, how it just gets deployed, and ideally, I don't even think of that much as flow, by the way, because it should be instant, right? It just happens, and you need that pipeline, and the pipeline needs whatever controls you need to put into it. But we also you need to understand where the work's coming from. Like how the work is being passed on to the team. So all these things, all of a sudden, before it was just source code that was kind of formalized, that was a thing that we could talk and reason about and study and analyze. And then the pipeline came there, and then the actual where the work was described, the work items, the issues, the tasks, and the like, those became formalized with those agile tools. And for me, it was okay if we're going to think and understand flow, even from a developer and team point of view, even in something that's much simpler, as let's say team of 5 people working on open source, we need to put these things together. And of course, at the same time, as you mentioned, DevOps, the concepts of DevOps were really just coming from the concepts of lean and theory of constraints. And by the way, for me, I guess a transformational moment, I know we didn't dwell too much on the past, but Ken Beck's book, XP, when we started applying it on the open source project I was working on, we all read that book. That book details, I actually reread this when I was writing Project to Product. I was like, wow, he describes theory of constraints for software so eloquently. So we were all at that point thinking, okay, we need to think about not just the CI/CD pipeline, but the principles of DevOps and what Agile is meant to be, which is this feedback loop. This, and if you could just back to DevOps, flow feedback and continual learning. So, and to do that as you scale, we need a way to model it, to understand it. So for me, the research really became, okay, well, how do we formalize that thing, which is a value stream, so that we can look at it, we can analyze it, we can see which one has fast flow, which one has slower flow, and so on. Again, initially, really from the development perspective, but then as with TaskTop, we started studying, we created the integration technology, TaskTop Hub. We started getting insights into how things were flowing at large scales and across these tools, across these silos, sometimes across organizational boundaries when you've got contractors or business partners or those kinds of things. And that's really where things clicked for me, is that same thing that I was analyzing to help developers and development teams understand their day, that same thing in large organizations was even more important. And it was not formalized, right? Work was passed, thrown over the fence, and the teams would take it in, and there wasn't this, there wasn't flow or feedback because it was disparate tools, disparate systems, disparate kind of cultures in the end, between technology and the business. And so, yeah, that was really it. It's like I realized, okay, this is all sorts of interesting and important things will be happening in the different disciplines. Like there'll be cool stuff happening on Agile, on cloud, on how we do release automation, how we define software portfolios, all those kinds of things. But I realized the biggest problem, if we're actually trying to drive to the outcomes that we produce through software, is defining and managing these value streams. So, and interestingly, for many organizations, it still is the biggest problem, right? And they're just now starting to understand how big a problem it is, because the amounts of money they've poured into each of the silos, they're not quite getting the ROI from, right? If you do a cloud transformation, but you don't have defined and measured value streams where you're actually reducing your flow time, you're going to end up with an overall less efficient and less productive organization, because you're now spending more on cloud. You'll end up with these cost bubbles that you're not going to manage. So, and whereas if you take the other approach, which of course the cloud vendors would have you do as well, and you actually use that opportunity of, let's say, investing in cloud to shorten your flow time and to get that fast feedback loop, which is really the benefit of cloud, then you're winning. So yeah, I realized, and again, it's back to your point on the paradigm shift, that these concepts that we defined in DevOps and Agile, if they did not start helping, if they did not define the new organizational model for technology organizations or companies who are going through transformations or becoming digital businesses, none of the great things we were learning in each of the disciplines would matter, because we were not optimizing front-end flow. We were just getting developers better tools or better services, or hiring more of them, while 80% of their day was filled with waste.